a meditation practice, even though that sounds like, oh, that's the more upper chakras, that's a more spiritual practice. But to ground yourself, actually sitting on the ground and having a meditation practice is the most grounding activity that you can actually do.
Namaste. You're listening to the Savannah Podcast. Join us on an exploration of Eastern spirituality, yoga philosophy, and conscious living for the new age. This podcast is a production of SavannahSpirit.com, the best place to shop for unique clothing, spiritual handcrafted jewelry, healing gemstones, and fair trade gifts from the Far East. Now, here's your host, Brett Larkin.
Hello, Savannah family. Welcome back to the show. Today, we're talking about one of my favorite topics. I can never get enough of it, the chakras. We're talking with Michelle S. Fondin, the author of Chakra Healing for Vibrant Energy and The Wheel of Healing with Ayurveda. She's the owner of the Ayurvedic Path Yoga and Wellness Studio, where she practices as an Ayurvedic lifestyle counselor and as a yoga and meditation teacher. She holds a Vedic Master Certificate from the Chakra Center and has worked with Dr. Deepak Chopra teaching yoga and meditation. Today, we're going to talk about the chakras, positioned along the spinal axis from the tailbone all the way to the crown of the head. These 7 main energy centers of the body are so interesting. Again, like I said, I can never get enough of them. She's going to explain each one in this episode, demystify their role in facilitating healing, and we're going to discuss what it means to have a chakra that is blocked and how to bring it back into balance. We're also going to discuss Ayurveda and each dosha as it relates to the chakra system, which is something that doesn't get talked about enough. And if you want to go even deeper, you definitely are going to want to tune into Thursday's episode as well, because we talk about the Yoga Sutras, Tantra, and Kundalini Awakening as it relates to the chakras. Before we dive into our conversation with Michelle, I want to take a quick moment to remind you of the ways you can support the show. Leaving a review here on iTunes and savannahspirit.com/review will show you how to do that if you're at all confused. And the other way is to make a purchase at savannahspirit.com. And today I'm highlighting their rose quartz crystals. Michelle tells us in today's episode about how she actually wore rose quartz inside her bra to help balance her heart chakra. And I thought it was a really beautiful idea. So whether it's rose quartz or some other crystal that you're looking for, make sure to check out savannahspirit.com and use that code podcast30 for 30% off your first order. All right, now let's dive in to today's episode. Michelle, thank you so much for being here and coming on the show.
Of course. Thank you, Brett.
I've been so looking forward to speaking with you because you are an expert in one of my absolutely favorite topics, the chakras. So Savannah listeners are pretty savvy, I think. We've done a couple episodes on the chakras, but can you just say very succinctly what the chakras are, just for people who maybe haven't heard of them before?
Right. So the chakras are energy centers within the body, and there are 7 main chakras from the base of the spine up through to the crown of the head. Think of them as vortices. The word chakra literally means wheel or disc. And so they're spinning wheels of energy throughout the body. And anatomically, they're like concentration of bundled nerves, but they also correspond to various organs and parts of the body as well. And so these areas or energy centers can be blocked, they can be open, they can be kind of in between, but the idea is to work with them as an additional aspect to your healing. And we're going to learn about that.
Which I'm very excited to do. There's so much I want to really dive deep with you on, but I do think it would be worth our while for you to just maybe quickly, again, super succinct, go through the chakras root to crown. Again, just in case we have folks out there listening who this is completely new information. And you mentioned something about the organs, and I'd love it if you don't mind. Would you include which organ is related to each energy center? Because I think that's something that doesn't get talked about that much.
Of course. So we're going to start at the base of the spine. I'd like you just to visualize the base of the spine, the first 3 vertebrae. That's called the root chakra, Mooladhara. The color is red. There are colors of the rainbow that correspond to each of the chakras. That's what makes them fun. And so the base of the spine root chakra called Mooladhara, that is our sense of security and having our basic needs met here on earth. It corresponds to the area of the perineum the base of the spine, as I mentioned, the bladder. The sex organs are between the first and second chakra. If you're a man, of course, the scrotum and the testicles are part of that base chakra. And we're talking about the colon, the rectum, and all that area. Then we move up to the second chakra, the Svadhisthana, creativity and sexual center. So, of course, this is the area of not only creativity and procreation, but it's also where, especially if you're female, your sex organs lie. So think of the womb of creation, and the color is orange. And then we move up to the third chakra, the solar plexus, source of personal power. And this color, think of the color yellow, like the sun. It's solar in nature, it's heating. And this is the area really where we feel our power, our inner power to move outward into the world. This is our personality. Some might say it's also the ego, but it does correspond to the digestive organs as well. And then we move up to the heart, the fourth chakra, Anahata, our source of love and compassion. The color is emerald green, and this has some of those major organs. So, of course, we have our heart, we have our lungs, our bronchial passages, and it corresponds to giving and receiving love, giving and receiving compassion, but it's also very life-sustaining. That's one of the life-sustaining chakras. And then we go to the throat. This is called Vishuddha, the area of the throat, and the color is blue, and it is our verbal expression or our higher truth. It's being able to express yourself, express your higher truth. And the organs that correspond to the throat and the anatomical parts of the body would be the thyroid gland, parathyroid glands, the thymus gland, the jaw, the mouth, the larynx, the vocal cords. Then we move up to the third eye, our center of intuition. And it's just like it says, it's right in between the eyebrows, which also includes our physical eyes. And it includes our ears as well. So our eyes and connected to the ears, having that sense of hearing and seeing, our sense of intuition. And the color is indigo, and that's called Ajna. Then we move up to the crown chakra, Sahasrara, thousand petal lotus, and source of enlightenment and spiritual connection. It's our connection to our higher selves or a more spiritual side of ourselves, but it's also connection to others and spirituality with others, having that more ethereal connection to others, and also our connection to the universe and the divine. And of course, that's the part of us is our brain. That's our center that is most affected by this crown chakra.
Amazing.
Violet or white.
Yes, violet or white.
Exactly.
So, okay, I already have questions based on just what I heard. This is very exciting. But before we start going into all the details, there's this concept out there that of course, there's these energy centers, but that they can be in balance or out of balance. Can you tell the listeners a little bit more about what that means from your perspective?
Correct. Okay. A chakra can be in balance, which means that think of the vortice or the wheel of energy, and it's spinning without any hindrance, if you will. And it's spinning at a balanced speed for us. And it's allowing energy to flow from one chakra to the next without any hindrance. Now, if a chakra is blocked, it means that there's something in that energy, that spinning energy, that is, think of it as just like having a boot on your tire. So you can't go anywhere. In the same vein, a chakra can be blocked, which means the energy is actually blocked in that anatomical region in the body. Now, it can happen on a physical level, an emotional level, on a spiritual level, and we'll dig a little bit deeper into that. But a chakra can also be depleted, meaning not enough energy, and that would mean a blockage. But it can also be excessive or having way too much energy in that area, which can also lead to imbalances. So you want a balance between the two. You don't want a completely blocked chakra, but you don't want an excessively energetic chakra either.
I think that's such an important thing to talk about because I think people use this word blocked, and it's really not that simple. It's like either the chakra is in excess or it's in deficiency, right? And I think maybe sometimes when people say blocked, they're what they really mean is it's in a deficient state.
Yes.
Got it.
Typically what people mean. In the excessive state, like I said, when we think about balance in life, you can always have too much of a good thing, right? So we don't want to have that excessive energy either, because that can also bring us out of balance. And that's something that most people also forget about. They forget the fact that you can have too much of a good thing, and then that does too lead to an imbalance.
So people can visualize this sitting or driving or wherever they are. Can you give a couple examples of perhaps an excessive heart chakra or a deficient root chakra? Or I don't know, what are just some of your fun favorite examples to really help people visualize what you're talking about here?
Yeah, so let's just take the heart, since that was the first one that you mentioned. So, the thing about the heart is that it's our source of love and compassion, which also encompasses things like forgiveness, being able to love, give and receive love freely, being able to have compassion and empathy, and being able to give yourself self-love, right? And we often forget about that too, that it's not only giving love, but it's allowing yourself to receive love, including self-love. So let's say someone has an excessiveness of this heart chakra energy. Well, they might give too much to depletion. So they're giving without receiving. And then they feel completely depleted because they have nothing left to give. So that could be an example of an excessive amount of that energy in the heart chakra, where you feel so much compassion and so much empathy for somebody that you give too much. Another is in the seventh chakra, the Sahasrara or thousand petal lotus chakra, which is our spirituality. So an example of a blocked spiritual chakra for the seventh might be spiritual skepticism, or not believing in anything beyond the physical and just being stuck, being like, there's nothing else. This is all there is, and nothing is magical and nothing is intuitive and nothing, so staying kind of stuck in that mindset that there's nothing beyond the physical. So that would be the seventh chakra blocked. An excessive seventh chakra would be someone that's on a spiritual quest, but then they go so far into spiritual fanaticism that they go off the charts. And we all know people like that they're it's almost like they're spiritually dogmatic. And so they get into this mode where other people don't believe what they believe. Then they're almost admonished, they say, shame on you that you don't believe this because this is so crystal clear. So that would be almost the seventh chakra to an excess that goes to that other extreme.
Thanks. That's really helpful, I think, for us all to visualize as we learn this. And in terms of these chakras go from the base of the spine all the way up through the crown of the head, right? So I think another really common question people have when I talk and teach about this too is they always want to know, well, do you need to balance the first chakra and make sure that one is in balance before you go on to work with the second or the seventh? And what do you say about that in your book?
So the answer is yes and no. The answer is yes, because if we don't take care of the imbalances in the base chakra, for example, first, it can be really difficult to move up into the higher or more spiritual chakras, which the heart is the center of the seven. So that combines the chakras of matter, which I haven't mentioned yet. Let me just mention the first three chakras: the base, the sexual and creativity chakra, and the personal power chakra. Are the first three are chakras of matter. So they're more physical. They're more in the here and now, the earthly plane. And then the fourth is a combination between matter and spirit. And that really links the matter and spirit together. And then the final three, the fifth, sixth, and seventh, are the more spiritual in nature. So let's say you really want to work on the heart chakra, but you're stuck in the root chakra. And you're all about survival. It's all about, oh my gosh, where am I going to get money? How am I going to survive? How am I going to make the house payment? It's really hard to feel compassion and empathy and giving when you're stuck in that survival mode. So in that event, taking care of those chakras of matter are really important before you get into those higher states of consciousness or higher states of being. That being said, we all seem to have a chakra that is a chakra in progress for each of us. And for each of us, it's different for everybody. And for me, it was the throat chakra. And I tell a little bit about that in my book as well. But everybody has certain symptoms or struggles that they seem to have recurring in a specific chakra.
Sorry. So the example of something reoccurring could be like someone who's always kind of dating the wrong person or always has money problems or something like that. Is that what you mean?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, exactly. Or just symptomatic. Like, for example, if someone is constantly having, let's say, heartburn or irritable bowel syndrome or high acid levels in their tummy, that would indicate constant imbalance in that third chakra, the chakra of personal power. So you can really link even symptoms, physical symptoms, to a chakra imbalance.
Now, can someone who's interested in this go to someone like a chakra healer and have their chakras read, or is this something that's best done through self-inquiry? And it's interesting because you can look at both what's going on emotionally and the logistics of your life, right? For example, if you can't pay the rent on time, that's maybe a hint that maybe you have some money stuff going on. But I think a lot of times people hear about having their chakras read. What's that all about?
That's interesting. Yeah. There are certain energy healers that can certainly do that. I know there are Reiki specialists that specialize in the chakras. And if you don't know what Reiki is, if you're listening, Reiki is a type of energy healing. And Reiki practitioners, if they're good, they can, while they're practicing Reiki on you, they can tell which of your chakras might be blocked or excessive. And that's a really good tool. If you feel that you can't do it yourself, that's a really, really good tool. I mean, another possibility is dealing with another type of healer, which would be like a psychic or an angel reader. I also do angel readings. I don't do chakra healing yet. I'm working on my Reiki certification, but that's another thing. And so I think it's other practitioners that work in the realm of energy healing that are able to pinpoint how, if your chakras are blocked and which ones in fact are blocked. But the reason I wrote the book is more so that you can become attuned to your own body. And since I'm an Ayurvedic practitioner as well, that for me, becoming attuned with your own body is just, it's phenomenal. And it's an awakening that everyone has their own inner healer. And just to become aware to that is very empowering.
So tell us more about how Ayurveda weaves into all of this, because I think I wrote a lot of books on the chakras, and I think that's one thing that's really unique and different about what you're bringing to this.
Yeah. So if you're not familiar with Ayurveda, Ayurveda works on the basis of mind-body types, and it works in concert with nature and nature's natural rhythms. So Ayurveda has 5 elements: space, air, fire, water, and earth that combine to create the 3 main mind-body types called doshas. And the 3 main mind-body types are Vata, Pitta, and Kapha. So Vata is comprised of the 2 elements, space and air. Pitta is combined of fire and water, and Kapha is combined of water and earth. And so I wrote a book all about this. If you're curious, The Wheel of Healing with Ayurveda, an easy guide to a healthy lifestyle, are interwoven into the chakras because each of the chakras also has an element, one of those 5 major elements that I mentioned, that correspond to the chakras as well. So let's just take the base of the spine, the root chakra, which, if you think about it, what do roots do? They embed into the earth, right? And, you look at trees' roots, they embed right into the earth. So the element that corresponds to the root chakra is the element earth. And in the Ayurvedic doshas, the one dosha that has the element earth is the Kapha dosha. So you can look at the root chakra as being similar to the Kapha dosha, so that the Kapha person, the person who embodies these qualities of earth, has mostly this root chakra energy in them that typically is balanced. Now, it can also go out of balance, but it's easier for them to focus on balancing this particular chakra because naturally that's what they have in them. Does that make sense? Sure, absolutely. So let's take an example. The Vata dosha is comprised of space and air. So a Vata person, for example, is going to be more airy and more creative because they're living out in that space and ether. They're very creative people, so they have a hard time being grounded. So let's go back to the example of the root chakra, which is of earth. So a Vata type who is more airy and spacey, they might even be accused of being airheaded. You might know some of those in your life. Maybe you're like that, but I know I certainly am. They have a harder time with things of the root chakra because they lack the groundedness of the root chakra. So, for example, a Vata type might struggle their entire life with balancing the roots because root chakra is also, the imbalances of the root chakra is also based in fears, right? So that, again, I go back to that survivalist or the fight or flight mode of being. And so a Vata type might just have to work through those root chakra issues. Let's look at the Pitta type, which is the fire and water aspect. So which one of our chakras, Brett, you know this one, which one of the ones might correspond to fire?
I'm going to say, I feel like I'm on a game show. This is so fun. Solar plexus, third chakra.
There you go. So it's the solar plexus. So a Pitta type, for example, might have an easier time dealing with issues of personal power because they have that fire element within them. And in fact, Pitta types, because they are the only dosha that has the fire element, tends to be a leader, tends to be able to assert themselves well into the world, just like the shining ball of fire that we have in the sky, because they have that fire element within them. So they tend to be okay with it. They can also get out of balance, but they tend to be okay with areas of personal power. Where a Pitta person might have issues with might be the fourth chakra, for example, the heart, which is the air element. So Pitta types might be very much driven and go out there and go get them and get to the goal. But when it comes to empathy, they might have a more difficult time. So for example, a Pitta type might be working harder at opening the heart.
This is great, and I love the examples you're giving. I want to ask you, I love what you're saying, how the root, for example, someone who has kapha, for example, they have a more balanced root chakra, is what you're saying. Just like someone who might have an easier time balancing, and Pitta might have an easier time balancing solar plexus. But I'm curious, and I'm wondering, does it mean that they also could easily go into excess because they have more of that element? I thought so.
And that's just, so and that's the way the doshas work too, right? So if you're familiar with the Ayurvedic doshas, you don't need more than what you already have. So for example, a kapha type that has a lot of water and earth elements within them, on one hand, they are grounded and they are loyal, because someone who's grounded is also loyal, right? A tree doesn't move very far from its roots. So they're grounded and they're loyal and they stay in one place. They don't really move around too much, and they're stable. They have that sense of stability. But if they have an increase of that earth quality and they have an increase of that water quality, then they might, for example, have excessive weight gain, or they might become depressed. They might become possessive in relationships. They tend to hold on to relationships or things. They might hoard things as well. That is actually true, that because you have a certain element that is predominant in your mind-body type, it can also easily become excessive.
Right, just like all the Pitta people who are workaholics or don't know how to slow down.
Exactly.
It's really interesting. I think what I want to ask you next is, how does society play into all of this? Because I know you talk about this in your book, which is really cool. And I think, at least this is my experience, you can tell me if you agree, but I feel like we are living in like the age of Vata disorders, right? Just because of like the age we're living in. How does that relate to the chakras? And can you walk the listeners through a little bit what that means?
Yeah, of course. So it's interesting because I was listening to the news today, actually. I don't listen to the news, but like a few minutes of NPR in the morning, because that's pretty much all my Vata can handle. But I was listening to it, and it's really funny because I think like we're in an interesting point in society right now that on one end, we're having an awakening. On one end, we're having an awakening where the barriers that were there before are starting to lift. And I feel that with all this push for acceptance of various types of lifestyle and this push for acceptance and inclusion with people with disabilities, with people with alternative lifestyles. So there's this opening to a more spiritual awakening, because what is a spiritual awakening? It's transcendence of the physical, right? It's transcendence of boundaries. And so on one end, I feel like we're going toward this means of transcendence. But on the other end, there's this other end of the spectrum where I see society in this constant first chakra panic, if you will. And that's really what we're seeing here, especially in the US. We're seeing, the need for, gun control. But on the other end, we have this other aspect where they're like, oh, we need guns and now we need guns in classrooms. And that's a first chakra fear. That's a fight or flight. That's this deep-seated insecurity where we need to be in this survivalist mode. So we're in a really interesting time now that you see this dichotomy happening. I think as far as the Ayurvedic dosha, and you were talking about living in a Vata society, I'd say most definitely that we're living in a society that is always on. We don't shut off. So this Vata is always like fleeting from one thing to the next thing. And it's without, like I said, it's more going toward that without boundaries and without groundedness. And I think that what we do need in our society is not this frenetic survivalist first chakra out of balance mode, but what we truly need is this groundedness of the first chakra where we feel safe and secure and grounded so that we can safely explore the more spiritual aspects of society. So we can safely feel that we can move into this more spiritual plane where there is this awakening on a global scale so that we can move out there toward the greater good. But that won't happen until we have overcome this frenetic panic and fear mode. And I think it's going to take the yogis and yoginis of this world to have that realization that it's time to slow down. It's time to do your yoga practice daily, to meditate daily, to focus on the spiritual, to stop going from one thing to the next without taking time to rest. And that's really what Vata needs, is that resting time to be able to regroup and have the energy to be able to then expand.
So well said. And I'm going to ask you in the next episode about Tantra, the sutras, and more about balancing. But for right now, just while we're on this topic, because I think something that everyone who's listening can take away from this is maybe some tips or ideas on how to balance that root chakra. A, because it's so important based on everything we just talked about that's going on with society. And B, because it's the foundation, right? So do you want to share today with some of the listeners just some of the tips, either from your book or just your own personal experience on what we can do to balance the root, balance Mooladhara?
Yes. So basically, when you're balancing Mooladhara, what you want to do is eat more foods from the earth that are holistic in nature. And I know people tell you this all the time. I understand that. I totally get it. And I know it's hard sometimes to focus on fresh home-cooked meals and those warmer, grounding foods, which are going to make you feel fantastic. But, getting rid of the pesticides and herbicides in your food, eating organic, eating more. When I say earth-based foods, I'm talking about whole foods. If it hasn't seen the sun in a long time, or your food has never seen the sun, it's probably a good idea to not eat it. So that's one. A meditation practice, even though that sounds like, oh, that's the more upper chakras, that's a more spiritual practice. But to ground yourself, actually sitting on the ground and having a meditation practice, the most grounding activity that you can actually do. And then there are grounding yoga practices, not the vinyasa flow, not the hot, excessive fitness yoga, but doing a more grounding yoga practice like a hatha type yoga practice is a great one. And if you're a yoga beginner, that's even better, because then you're more prone to doing the slower breathing, pranayama. I talk about the Dirga, the 3-part breath, the Ujjayi breath, to really slow you down. And again, taking those breaks throughout the day to do a 5-minute meditation in between. And really observing the flow of nature is one of the other things that can help you feel grounded.
I love the tip about nature and the ones you've given so far. I think another one we hear a lot in the context of the root chakra is this idea of self-care. But I think that's also one of those terms that gets thrown around so much that it's hard for us to really get concrete about what does that look like when you're raising a family and, rushing around to fit your yoga practice in and, cooking all the nutritious meals. Do you have any tips for listeners just about self-care when it comes to root chakra?
Yeah, saying no.
It's a good one.
Yeah, that's a big one. That's a big one I've had to learn in the past couple of years. Saying no, it's instead of saying yes to everything. I think that the one really important thing is keeping on a routine. And this is something that's recommended to balance Vata dosha as well, is respecting the daily routine. And all of us have this circadian rhythm, this 24-hour clock within us. And we don't always respect that. And it ties back into connecting with nature, to connecting to the universe. And self-care is scheduling your workout time, scheduling your yoga and meditation time, scheduling in time to just be, scheduling in time to play with your kids, to be goofy, play with your partner, having the ebb and flow, because everything in nature works with an ebb and flow, and we don't always honor that. If we're on, like if you put a flashlight on and turn it on 24/7, those batteries are going to go out much sooner than if you only turn on the flashlight when you need it. So honor that ebb and flow, and self-care is all about that. It's about honoring the ebb and the flow. It's that it is okay to take breaks. It is okay to, give yourself an Abhyanga self-administered massage if you can't afford to go out there and get a massage. And I do talk about that in my Ayurvedic book. I talk about it in my videos. That is what self-care is. It's more about connecting yourself with the rhythms of nature and not expecting so much of yourself and not giving to depletion without receiving.
So beautiful. So Savannah family, we're going to be back with Michelle on Thursday. We're going to go deeper because I have questions still. And then we're also going to talk about how Tantra and the Yoga Sutras weaves into all of this. We're also going to talk about awakening Kundalini. So you definitely want to tune in on Thursday to hear the rest of this episode. For now, I'm wishing you a beautiful day full of yoga and meditation. I'm sending you so much love from my heart to yours. Namaste.
You've been listening to the Savannah Podcast. To find out more about Savannah, go to savannahspirit.com or follow Savannah on Facebook at facebook.com/Savannah Spirit. For daily inspiration, check out our blog at savannaeast.com. Be sure to join us next week for a new episode. And thank you for listening to the Savannah Podcast.